Today I am going to discuss the topic about the importance of environmental education in India. India, a country with the seventh largest landmass in the world, is a land of ancient traditions. With over a billion people and at least 17 major languages. The diversity of India in terms of culture and biological wealth is enormous. In spite of rapidly changing lifestyles, the tradition of living in harmony with nature and of environmentally sound practices underpin the lives of most people. Man is only one of the millions of species existing on Earth. At the same time, man is exploiting nature to the extent that nobody will escape from the harm caused out of the greedy gambling. Human demands are never ending. It is against this backdrop that the country's environmental education strategy has been evolved. The Constitution of India explicitly makes environmental conservation a duty. The central government and all states within India now have a ministry or department of environment. Education departments recognize environmental education as an essential part of education. Now, emerging of environmental education. The concept of environmental education emerged only in the 70s, which were called as the decade of environmental education. During that period, the world realized that environmental concerns and awareness could be spread only through a mass environment education program. The concept of environment education emerged from the Stockholm Conference organized by the United Nations in 1972. Recommendation of the conference emphasized organization of formal and mass environmental education programs, educating the people at large about environment and its components would develop critical thinking, analytical and problem-solving skills in them. It would develop knowledge and insights to improve quality of human health or life on this earth. Now, what is environmental education? Environmental education, properly understood, should constitute a comprehensive lifelong education, one responsive to change in a rapidly changing world. It should prepare the individual for life through an understanding of the major problems of the contemporary world and the provision of the skills and attributes needed to play a productive role towards improving life and protecting the environment with due regard given to ethical values. The study, which involves the various things in our surroundings, is environmental education. Environmental education informs us in great detail about that. It teaches us about the life of other creatures and how they manage to survive. Environmental education gives us an idea about the balance in the ecosystem, which is being distributed due to human interference. It concentrates more on zoology and botany rather than the human anatomy. Environmental education teaches us about everything that is not about the species Homo sapiens, that is man, but everything that influences a man's life on this earth. Environmental education sustainable management, and responsible actions by individuals and communities is an important component of an effective framework for protecting and managing the environment. Environmental education is now focus for education. It is a way of helping individuals and societies to resolve fundamental issues relating to the current and future use of the world's resources. However, simply raising awareness of these issues is insufficient to bring about the change. Now, why should we do environmental studies? Today, we are faced with a major threat called global warming. The climate of various places on the earth is going through a major change. The heat level is rising with every passing day. One of the major factors that contributed for this impending disaster is pollution, which is essential man-made. All the smoke from the factories and cars are raising the pollution level. The waste from factories which are being dumped in the rivers are slowly depleting the life of our friends who thrive in water. One of the seven wonders of the world, the Taj Mahal, faces a major threat today because of pollution. Environmental education is being pushed so that people become aware of this harm they are causing to Mother Earth. This is a desperate call for awareness and save our abode. The various resources on the earth is also being depleted, which needs to be checked as well. Something so precious as water and food should never be wasted. Environmental education is basically an awareness program in which participation is compulsory for everyone for their own sake. There is now a wide appreciation of the damage being done to the environment through human activity. This damage is sometimes global, as in the case of the depletion of the ozone layer and of the increase in greenhouse gas emissions. Often, the damage is regional, as with pest degradation of native forests or the erosion of river catchments. Often too, the damage is local. Pollution from motor vehicles, contamination of soil by chemicals, sewage discharges, these and hundreds of other human activities stress the environment. With what has not worked and why? Appreciation and concern for the environment are values that need to be inculcated during the years of development, during the early years of development. And thus, environmental education for children and youth becomes an integral and important part of the environmental education strategy of any country. India, a land of diversity, ecological, biogeographical, cultural, social requires efforts which are rooted in the local context, which present a picture to which the child relates, can provide solutions of which the child can be a part. Why do we need to look at environmental education now? In present time, man to be interrelated and their interdependence in them. The nature or environment becomes a source of sorrow and unhappiness because dust of earth, light, and air of sky has the adverse effect on human beings. Therefore, it recognizes the need of introduction of environmental education. A clean and healthy environment is quite essential for the very survival of the human race. A vast country like India faces formidable challenges in the form of exploding population, widespread poverty, recurring natural disasters, and the dwindling natural resource base. A majority of the population lives below the poverty line and are illiterate. They depend exclusively on our diminishing natural resource base. So we need to think and act now. Rapid population growth in India causes untold suffering and all related hazards. It causes pollution and the resource like air, water, etc. Reduce the quality of life of man. It causes resource scarce. For these reasons, environmental education is needed for population consciousness. Environmental education present scenario in India. India is one of the very few countries in the world where a commitment to environmental protection and improvement is enshrined in the Constitution. Environmental education has been a major thrust of both the Ministry of Environment and Forest and the Ministry of Human Resource Development of the Government of India. While the Ministry of Human Resource Development works towards the environmentalization of the formal curriculum. The Ministry of Educational and Environmental and Forest focuses on non-formal educational programs and strategies to reach the larger community that includes children, youth, urban and rural communities, industry, decision makers, etc. In addition to the efforts of the government and a large number of voluntary organizations are involved in promoting environmental education in both formal institutions and non-formal settings. The main sources of funds for educational institutions and NGOs for environmental education activities are the government, states and central, independent trust, donor agencies, etc. The National Policy on Education 1986 states there is a paramount need to create a consciousness of the environment. It must permeate all ages, all sections of society. Beginning with the child, environmental consciousness should inform teaching in schools and colleges. This aspect will be integrated in the entire educational processes. The national policy on education visualizes a national curricular framework which contains a common core including several elements having direct bearing on the natural and social environment of the pupils. These core areas are expected to occupy place of prominence not only in instructional materials but also in classroom and out of school activities. Today, environmental education in the formal educational system in India is handled at three levels. It is a composite subject called environment at the primary school level. It is infused into environment in regular school subjects at the middle and secondary school level and is a separate subject at the college level. For environmental education to be effectively taken up in the curricular, co-curricular and extracurricular mode, resources and facilities have to be built up and strengthened both within and outside the school and college system. Now, what are the objectives of environmental education? The first objective of environmental education is awareness. To acquire an awareness and sensitivity to the total environment and its allied problems. Knowledge. To gain a variety of experiences in and acquire a basic understanding of the environment and its associated problems. Attitudes. To acquire a set of values and feelings of concern for the environment and motivation for actively participating in environmental improvement and protection. Skills. To acquire the skills for identifying and solving environmental problems. Participation. To encourage citizens to be actively involved at all levels in working toward resolution of environmental problems. Evaluation ability. To evaluate environment measures and education programs in terms of social, economic, ecological and aesthetic factors. Now, what are the goals of environmental education? Environmental education aims to develop awareness, sensitivity, and a positive attitude towards environment. Knowledge and understanding of the ecological processes. Greater participation in activities that help to overcome environmental challenges. Now, what is the importance of environmental education? The country accepted the need for environmental education with the recommendation of Tiwari Committee, 1980. Many people recognize an urgent need for environmental education. Besides introducing the subject of environmental science at all levels of education, we must give much emphasis on the new approaches and programs of environmental education. They live public in rural, tribal, slum and urban areas. Women and students and teachers in schools, colleges and universities need to be educated about the environment. Environmental education must strongly promote the need for personal initiative and social participation to achieve sustainability. Environmental education is important for understanding the basis of our existence and those around us. Hence, this stresses on the subject environmental education together with sound legislation, sustainable management, and responsible actions by individuals and communities is an important component of an effective policy framework for protecting and managing the environment. Environmental education is a new focus for education. It is a way of helping individuals and societies to resolve fundamental issues relating to the current and future use of the world's resources. However, simply raising awareness of these issues is insufficient to bring about change. Environmental education must strongly promote the need for personal initiative and social participation to achieve sustainability. The concept of environmental education is not a new one, as a major part of human knowledge is derived from nature. Environment pollution in different forms continues to trouble us, but environmental education makes it possible for us to understand the clear outcome of human activity on the environment. Those who want to pursue environmental education seriously shall also study related disciplines such as physical science, biological science, social science, and applied science. Environmental education can be pursued at undergraduate and postgraduate level. Now, what are the parameters of environmental education? The environmental education should consider the environment in its totality, natural and built, technological and social, economic, political, technological, cultural, historical, moral, aesthetic. Should be a continuous lifelong processes, beginning at the preschool level and continuing through all formal and non-formal stages, being interdisciplinary in its approach, drawing on the specific content of each discipline in making possible a holistic and balanced perspective. Examining major environmental issues from local, national, regional, and international points of view so that the student receive insight into environmental conditions in other geographical areas. It should focus on current and potential environmental situations while taking into account the historical perspective. Should promote the value and necessity of local, national, and international cooperation in the prevention and solution of environmental problems. Explicitly consider environmental aspects in plans for development and growth. This enables learners to have a role in planning their learning experiences and provide an opportunity for making decisions and accepting their consequences. They relate environmental sensitivity, knowledge, and problem-solving skills and values clarification to every age, but with a special emphasis on environmental sensitivity to the learner's own community in early years. It helps learners discover the symptoms and real causes of environmental problems. Emphasize the complexity of environmental problems and thus the need to develop critical thinking and problem solving skills. Utilize diverse learning environments and a broad array of educational approaches to teaching, learning about and form the environment with due stress on practical activities and first-hand experience. To achieve the goals and objectives of environmental education, it was seen that environmental education needs to be planned nationally. In the formal school environment, education concepts may be carefully integrated with different subject areas in a creative and functional manner. However, it requires careful planning and implementation strategies. Now, what are the various dimensions of environmental education? Environmental education is now being seen as an instrument and a process that enables participation and learning by people of all ages, based on two-way communication rather than the old paradigm of one-way flow of information from teachers to pupils. The content and substance of environmental education is also undergoing review and change. Reorienting education as a whole towards sustainability involves the various levels of formal, non-formal and informal education at all levels of society. It involves a threefold classification of environmental education based on different disciplines. First, environmental studies. It is concerned with the environmental disturbances and minimization of their impact through changes in social science. Second, environmental science. It deals with the study of the processes in water, air, soil and organisms which lead to environment damage. Third, environmental engineering. It involves the study of technical processes used to minimize pollution. Elements of effective environmental programs. Effective environmental education programs are relevant to the mission of agency or organization, to the educational objectives of the audience and to the everyday lives of the individual learners. An agency or organization's mission and environmental priorities provide direction for program development in environmental education, guiding the development to goals and objectives and their choice of target audience. Tying environmental education programs to the agency or organization's primary purpose help focus program development and justify finding. Prevent the establishment of generic environmental education programs and aid in program efficiency and sustainability. Environmental education programs are often distinguished from informative and interpretive programs, as they have objectives beyond information dispersal and involve working with an audience that often has predefined learning objectives. A school group, for example, has predefined learning objectives in the form of curriculum. What teachers will teach, the order in which concepts should be covered, and expected knowledge and skills. The key to relevant environmental education programs is finding commonalities among the existing learning objectives and the agencies or organization and the audience organization's mission and priorities. By doing so, the needs of both the provider and the audience are met. Teachers or leaders of the groups that will be participating in the program can often help find these commonalities by providing and explaining materials that offer learning objectives, state standards, benchmarks or badge requirements. These all are the examples. Effective environmental education programs and materials need to present information and ideas in a way that is relevant to the learners. This need for relevance stems from children's to cognitive development as they develop the ability to think concretely before they can think abstractly. When programs move beyond what is relevant and meaningful, learners don't have the chance to build their learning on what they already know. Learning becomes too abstract. Thus, content is more effectively conveyed when embedded in a local context, giving learners a chance to explore and experience what's around them. The sensitivity, knowledge, and skills needed for this local connection provide a base for moving out into larger system. Broader issues and an expanding understanding of causes, connection and consequences. Likewise, skill building and application must be couched within the context of solving real problems. Problems that directly affect learners either at home, at school, or in their community. When environmental education is taught in the place where they live and through authentic situations, a learner's own experiences become a part of their education. Enjoyable learning experiences also help make programs more relevant to the learners. Many environmental educators realize the value of learners having direct contact with nature. Small bits of wild places where kids can explore are disappearing and time to visit them becomes more and more rare, resulting in the extinction of experience. Thus, environmental educators need to reintroduce learners to their local area by exploring and experiencing it. By learning about it and celebrating it by doing so, environmental educators help learners develop a sense of wonder and a sense of place, fostering that awareness and appreciation that motivate them to further questioning, better understanding, and appropriate concern and action. While enjoyable experiences in nature are one way to launch an environmental education program, it is not the only one way. Learners in a central city environment, for example, may become interested in the environment through efforts to clean up a toxic waste site because it is damaging their water supply. Effective environmental education programs involve stakeholders in all stages of the program, from the development of the program to its evaluation. Successful programs bring a coalition of stakeholders together to design, implement, and evaluate a program that meet their needs. Stakeholders are those that have a stake in the program that is developed. They are the people who care about a program, are willing to develop a commitment to it, and are best able to offer input into it. These stakeholders might be teachers, funders, agency supervisors, community leaders, landowners, extension workers, parents, and curriculum developers. Their participation lends a variety of perspective to the programs, shaping the program focus and audience. Their participation also helps achieve buy-in early in the process, so that as the program is developed, it is more likely to be used. Another advantage of using stakeholders is that it reinforces the image of community partnership and or ownership and interest in the program. Stakeholders are also important during the evaluation phases of the program, as they can offer input about what information to gather, how to gather, and ultimately how to share it without important audiences. Organization using this approach have found several things helpful. Environmental education programs empower learners with the skills to help prevent and address environmental issues and with a sense of personal and civic responsibility. Awareness and knowledge of environmental processes and systems play an important role in environmental education. But awareness and knowledge alone do not make a program an environmental education program. And when considering the goal of environmental education, environmental literacy, and its accompanying responsible environmental behavior, research shows that knowledge and attitudes are not the only variables at play, while knowledge and attitudes alone don't help or harm the environment. Human behaviors too. Behaviors, of course, are supported by knowledge and attitudes, but there is not a direct cause and effect progression from knowledge to attitude to behavior. As educators have long believed, environmental education attempts to teach students how to think and not what to think. Rather than directing learners in a specific course of behavior, environmental education helps learners from the capacity to collect and analyze information, make informed decisions, and participate fully in civic life. This required more than the awareness and knowledge of environmental processes and systems and positive attitudes towards the environment. It requires procedural knowledge of how to affect change and the competency in citizen action skill needed to participate fully in civic life. Educators can help develop this procedural knowledge and competency and citizen actions skill by providing opportunities to define an issue, Determine if action is warranted. Identify other reward in the issues. Select appropriate action strategies. Create and evaluate an action plan. Implement the plan and evaluate the result. Educators can also provide opportunities to build skill in oral and written communications. Conflict resolution and leadership and opportunities to participate in the political or regulatory processes. Consumer action and community service. This locus of control or sense that they have the ability to influence the outcome of a situation is important in helping learners develop a sense of empowerment and a sense of personal responsibility. Further aspects of environmental education. Environmental education programs are accurate and balanced, incorporating multiple perspectives and interdisciplinary aspects. Environmental education has been criticized by a number of groups and individuals for lacking credibility and accuracy. In response to this wave of criticism, the National Environmental Education and Training Foundation prepared a briefing report. The report states children and adults receive messages about the environment from many places: television, movies, books, newspapers, and magazines. Their report further states that environmental education promotes quality education and effective teaching across the disciplines. This recent opposition has prompted environmental educators to take a closer look at the validity, relevancy, and accuracy of the field's materials and methods. The reports, books, and newspaper articles challenging the credibility of environmental education are helping ensure that the delivery of the environmental education continues to be high quality education. While there generally is consensus in the field for this balanced approach prescribed by NAAEE, some environmental educators believe taking more of an advocacy approach is warranted when educating for the environment. Effective environmental education programs are instructionally sound using best practices in education. In order for environmental education programs to be effective in an educational sense, they must also be congruent with the way people learn. Piaget theory implies that instructional method and content need to be consistent with how students develop cognitively, as children cannot learn if they cannot understand what they are being asked to learn. Applied to environmental education, curricula should be developed so that they facilitate stage relevant thinking and allow students to discover for themselves the logical connections between objective events. A further implication is for students to have many opportunities to explore the natural world and think it within their various stages of intellectual development. Effective environmental education programs are evaluated with appropriate tools. Program evaluation was born during the period of large-scale social programs, government intervention of the 1960s and 70s. Program evaluation focused on guiding funding decisions, helping determine what was worth funding and what was worth doing. As evaluations were implemented, a new role emerged, increasing overall programs' effectiveness by guiding improvement to the program. This type of evaluation is within contextual boundaries of time, place, values, and politics. Central to his definition is meeting the information needs of a specific intended users. This information needs, that is, their intended use, focus the evaluation. Care must be taken to incorporate the stakeholders. Opinions throughout the evaluation process, as this increases a likelihood that the findings will be used. For environmental educators, changes in knowledge, attitudes, intentions, and behaviors of program participants are of interest. While important, designing an assessment to measure these changes is difficult. The question must be specific enough to target some difference that will be measurable, and enough student must be involved to find significant differences. Teacher education and environmental education. In order to help students grow in knowledge, skill, and value, attitudes and awareness relevant to environment, teacher is expected to be not only dispenser of information and knowledge but also managers to teaching learning situations. The ways of classroom organization have also to be drastically changed. Teacher preparation assumes greater significance as teachers with the right attitude and will to equip the future generation molded during this period. In the present study, the investigators highlight the needs to understand one's immediate surroundings and the right attitude to preserve our local environmental resources at all costs. The effectiveness of environmental education relies heavily on the knowledge, skills, and attitudes of the educator. Environmental education is not only a change in what is being taught, but also a new perspective on why and how. The key to any change in the formal education system is the teacher, and unless the teacher is convinced about and feels competent to handle this, very little will change. The teacher has to internalize a change in his or her role for one of giver of knowledge to one of facilitator in the learning processes. If teachers are to be effective facilitators in bringing environmental education into teaching and learning, their capacities in understanding and internalizing the characteristics of environmental education and skills in transacting these need to be built and strengthened. One way to do this is through pre-service and in-service orientation in training. Environmental education in pre-service teacher education. Primary level. Pre-service teacher education for primary school teachers is a 2-year course. It covers foundation subjects as well as methodology subjects including educational philosophy, psychology, educational administration, methods of teaching, etc. The detailed guidelines and syllabus for the course has been developed by the National Council for Educational Research and Training. The state departments of education in the respective states administer the institutions for pre-service teacher training courses. The teaching environmental studies is placed under both science and social science syllabi. Recommended by the NCERT. Context related to environmental science teaching takes up a large part of first year syllabus. Environmental education in pre-service teacher training. Secondary level. Teacher training for secondary level is offered by B.Ed colleges affiliated to universities. Several universities have introduced environmental education as one of the optional or elective paper at the B.Ed level. This course covers a total of 40 hours and is graded for 100 marks. All the postgraduate level (MEd). Some universities have introduced environmental education as a special paper, while a few have given it in the status of a fully fledged course of 2 semesters. Environmental education in service training, the NCERT State Educational Research and Training and the District Institute of Educational Technology are largely involved in service training in India. Green teacher. In a developing country like India, there is need for capacity building of teachers. In environment education, both through pre-service and in-service teacher training programs, however, the in-service teacher training programs has to face the challenges of lack of time, resources and relevance of training programs to the needs of work situation. One such initiative is Green Teacher, a distance education course in environment education for practicing teachers launched by Center for Environment Education in India, collaboration with the Commonwealth of Learning. National Policy of Education and the Supreme Court ruling 2003 that environment education should be a compulsory curricular component at all levels of education. Starting 2004-2005, the Green Teacher program develops the necessary knowledge, skill and ideas pertaining to environment in the practicing teachers, which is novel initiative taking into consideration their constraints and the workplace. Importance of technology mediated environment education for teachers. Teachers can play a pivotal role in transmitting knowledge and creating awareness about the environment and help to tackle the local and global environmental issues. The teachers' community should be motivated and committed to the cause of realizing the goals of environmental education and should take initiative in designing the programs of environmental education. However, for teachers to succeed in their enterprise and endeavor for spreading environmental awareness, it is important that the educational institutions should provide conditions conducive for it. It is essential that teachers should be properly trained themselves on environment concept and skills to impart training to learners. Teachers should be well equipped with the knowledge, method and teaching learning material to inculcate the right understanding and attitude towards environment in the learners. To create a workforce and community of environmentally aware and concerned citizens, technology can play a vital role. Teacher educations for environmental education. Concerns and issues. There is a lack of adequate pre-service training in environmental education. There is also lack of consensus on what should be the scope and content of environmental education at various levels of pre-service training programs. A major concern is the danger that environmental education should not be perceived as mere introduction environmental concepts and facts. While environment as subject has been incorporated in one way or another in most school curricula, training in environmental education has not yet infused the curricula of teacher training courses. Thus, teachers are not well equipped to deal with the new subject area. Where environmental education has been introduced as an optional or elective subject into teacher training courses, it is not perceived by students to be as useful as other subjects, such as educational technology, multimedia education, computer education, etc. What are the challenges of environmental education? There are many challenges for environmental education in India. Apart from the obvious ones of helping strengthen environmental management and conservation, one of the most important one is to bring awareness of the need that the country develop a less wasteful ways that is the current paradigm. Environmental education is one of the tools that can help India achieve this goal. There are considerable initiatives in environmental education in India today. There are several challenges. Some of these are the challenge in a large and diverse community, the challenge of reaching out to large numbers cost effectively, the challenge of making environmental consideration relevant and meaningful to various groups, the challenge of putting environmental education on the agenda of educational decision makers, finding and developing human and financial resources for environmental education. What are the measures taken for consciousness? Population awareness program should be started from the village to towns. The students are to be taught to restore and construct their surroundings. There should be a topic to educate them. The areas must be taken up are human health, family planning, nutrition of child and women rural development, slum improvement, prevention of food contamination, etc. The children in the schools should be taught the role of trees, wildlife, etc. The objective-based training to be made to love for plants and animals. They must be sensitive to environmental problems. They must require skill for solving environmental problems. Conclusion. Teachers need to be prepared to become environmental educators, facilitators, who will proactively adopt the activity-oriented approach to teaching and learning through about for the environment. This will require, in addition to teacher training, ongoing support that will reach into school, colleges and influence the environmental education program. This support could be perhaps for an external resource agency that closely interacts with the educational system on an ongoing basis. From the above discussion, the following suggestions emerge. The problem of environment abuse is a serious one and needs to be addressed at the local, national and international level. It is agreed that teachers are potential change agents and are capable of generating a workforce of enlightened, skills, and motivated learners. They can empower the citizens with the ability, attitude, and values to protect the environment. Universities and schools have to play an important role to translate the objectives and recommendations of the various commissions and committees into practice for achieving environmental literacy and awareness among learners. Technological interventions and mass media should be employed to create environmental awareness among the teaching community. A convergence of conventional and open and distance learning system should be employed to meet this challenge. There is a need to train teachers in additional competencies regarding environmental education. The teacher training curricula should integrate environment education with the methodology component of all disciplines, since environment is a part of all areas of study. Collaborative ventures could be created between the teachers and community through the agencies of school, colleges, university and other institutions. Such as collaboration could include campaigns on environment awareness, tree plantation and waste management, or also in developing instructional materials. At last, I would like to say that environment education is a tool to make this world a better place